6 months had passed since the signing of the Treaty of Geneva. Ambassador Kethrol stood before the Concordance Council, his forearms folded behind his back, his golden eyes moving from face to face as he delivered his report. The council chamber was vast, a circular room carved from living stone on the Valdrani homeworld. Representatives from 17 species sat in tiered seats that rose toward a domed ceiling covered in stars. "The humans are not what we believe them to be," Kethrol said, his voice echoing in the great chamber. "They are not a primitive species struggling to reach the stars. They are a civilization that has been preparing for contact with the galaxy for nearly 60 years. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. A delegate from the Khazari Collective, a being with 4 eyes and scales the color of burnished copper, leaned forward. "How is this possible? Our observations showed them to be centuries behind us in development." "Their observations showed exactly what they wanted us to see," Kethrol replied. "They concealed their true capabilities. They presented a facade of weakness while building a military force capable of challenging any power in the Concordance." "Why would they do this?" asked a representative from the Morith hegemony, her voice cold and suspicious. "Because they understood something that we had forgotten. In a dangerous universe, the weak are conquered. The humans knew that if they revealed their true strength too early, before they were ready, they might be destroyed before they could defend themselves. So they hid. They watched. They prepared." The council was silent for a long moment. Then the Supreme Arbiter, an ancient Valdrani, whose silver-blue skin had faded to pale gray, spoke. "What do you recommend, Ambassador?" Kethrol took a deep breath. "I recommend that we honor the treaty we signed, that we treat humanity as equals, and that we never, ever make the mistake of underestimating them again." Far away, on a space station orbiting Mars, Captain Daniel Marsh stood at a window and watched construction crews work on humanity's first interstellar colony ship. The vessel was massive, a city in space, designed to carry 10,000 people to a world that had been identified as suitable for human life. Dr. Claire Bennett stood beside him, a cup of coffee warming her hands. "Hard to believe it has only been 6 months," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "A lot has changed." It had changed indeed. The revelation of the Shadow Fleet had transformed everything. People who had spent their entire lives believing that humanity was alone in the universe now knew the truth. They knew about the Valdrani. They knew about the Concordance. They knew about the Precursor Archive and the 60 years of secret development that had given humanity the tools to stand among the stars. Some had reacted with fear, some with anger, but most had reacted with something else entirely. Hope. For the first time in history, humanity had a common purpose. Not as nations competing against each other, but as a species working together for survival and advancement. Old conflicts seemed petty now, old hatreds meaningless. There were other intelligent beings in the universe, and humanity needed to be ready to meet them. "Admiral Cole wants to see you," Claire said, breaking into his thoughts. Daniel turned away from the window. "Did she say what about?" "No, but she looked serious." Admiral Patricia Cole's office was on the top level of the station, with windows that looked out at both Mars and the distant sun. She stood with her back to the door when Daniel entered, her hands clasped behind her. "Captain Marsh, thank you for coming." "Of course, Admiral. How can I help?" Patricia turned to face him. Her expression was grave. "We have received intelligence from our contacts in the Concordance. There is another power beyond the borders of Valdrani space. They call themselves the Dominion. They have been watching the situation with Earth very carefully." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "And they are not pleased. The Dominion believes that younger species should be controlled, not treated as equals. They see our treaty with the Valdrani as a threat to the natural order of things. Are they going to attack us?" Patricia shook her head slowly. Not yet. They are cautious. They want to learn more about our capabilities before they make any moves. But our analysts believe that conflict is inevitable. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but eventually they will come. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" "I need you to take command of a new task force. Your mission will be to explore beyond concordant space, to find allies, to gather intelligence, to prepare for what is coming." That sounds like a long-term assignment. Patricia smiled grimly. It is. You will be gone for years, maybe decades. You will see things that no human has ever seen before. You will face dangers that we cannot predict. Daniel looked out the window at the stars. When do I leave? As soon as your ship is ready. 3 weeks later, the ESS Horizon departed from Mars orbit. She was a new design, smaller than the warships of the Shadow Fleet, but faster and more advanced. A crew of 200 was handpicked from the best that humanity had to offer. Captain Daniel Marsh stood on the bridge as the faster-than-light drive powered up. Course plotted. "Captain," his navigator reported. "Ready for jump on your command." Daniel looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew. Men and women who had volunteered to leave everything they knew behind to venture into the unknown, to represent humanity among the stars. "Take us out," he said quietly. The horizon vanished in a flash of light. Behind her, Earth continued to spin in the darkness. Cities glowed on the night side. Ships moved in orbit. A civilization that had once believed it was alone in the universe now knew the truth. And it was preparing for whatever came next. On the Valdrani homeworld, Kethrol stood in his garden and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, human ships were exploring, expanding, preparing. The species he'd once dismissed as primitive was now reshaping the balance of power in the galaxy. His aide, Valsoma, approached with a communication device in his hands. "Ambassador, you have a message from the human embassy." Kethrol took the device and read the message. It was short and simple. "Thank you for your wisdom and patience during the negotiations. We look forward to a long and productive relationship between our peoples." Signed, Admiral Patricia Cole. Valsoma looked at him curiously. "What does it say?" Kethrol smiled, something he had not done in months. "It says that we made the right choice." He put down the device and looked up at the stars again. "The humans are remarkable, Valsoma. They smiled while we threatened them. They agreed while they planned. They waited until they were ready, and then they showed us who they really were. Do you trust them?" Kethrol considered the question carefully. "I trust that they want peace. I trust that they will honor their agreements. And I trust that if anyone threatens them or their allies, they will respond with all the strength they have." He paused. "Yes, I trust them, because they earned that trust the hardest way possible, by being strong enough that they did not need to lie, and wise enough to know when to reveal the truth." The stars shone down on 2 worlds, human and Valdrani, bound together by a treaty that neither had expected. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the S-Horizon flew on toward the unknown. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage. They would never step off again. The story of Earth among the stars was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, dangers that could not be predicted, enemies that would need to be faced. But humanity had proven something important to itself and to the Fost-Theumas galaxy. They were not prey. They had never been prey. They were survivors, explorers, warriors when they needed to be, and peacemakers when they could be. They were human, and the galaxy would never forget it. The Vorakan ship appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system without warning. It was a small vessel, a courier ship, and it made no attempt to communicate with the human defense stations that detected it. It simply dropped a sealed metal container into orbit around Earth, then turned and disappeared back into the darkness between stars. Admiral Grace Harper received a call at 3 in the morning. She was 58 years old, a woman who had spent her entire life in service to Earth's military. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belt, put down rebellions on the outer colonies, and faced threats that most people never knew existed. She thought she had seen everything. She was wrong. The container was brought to a secure facility in Geneva. Grace stood in the examination room with a team of scientists and military officers, watching as the seals were carefully opened. The smell hit them first. It was the smell of death, of something that had been dead for weeks. Inside the container was a body. It took Grace a moment to recognize it, because it had been badly damaged. The eyes were gone. Strange symbols had been carved into the skin. But the face, what was left of it, belonged to Daniel Price. No one spoke. One of the scientists turned away and was sick in the corner of the room. A young officer began to cry silently. Grace just stood there, staring at what the Varakan had done to a man who had only wanted peace. There was a small device attached to the inside of the container. One of the technicians activated it, and a holographic image appeared in the air. It was High Lord Kethver, sitting on his throne, looking directly at the camera with those blood-colored eyes. "People of Earth," the Emperor said, his voice dripping with contempt, "your ambassador came to us speaking of friendship. He spoke of trade and cooperation. He dared to suggest that your pathetic species could stand as equals beside the Varakan Empire." Kethver smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "This is our answer. Look upon what remains of your diplomat. See what becomes of those who forget their place. If you wish to send more ambassadors, we will be happy to receive them. We will return them to you in the same condition." The recording ended with the sound of Varakan laughter. Grace reached out and turned off the device. Her hand was steady, but something inside her had changed. Something had broken, or perhaps something had hardened into steel. 6 hours later, the leaders of Earth gathered in the Coalition Council chambers. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and admirals, representatives from every nation and colony that flew humanity's flag. They sat in silence as the recording was played again. Some of them wept. Others stared at the screen with expressions of shock and horror. President Catherine Ellis sat at the head of the table. She was 52, a woman who had built her career on compromise and diplomacy. She believed in talking, in finding common ground, in solving problems with words rather than weapons. Daniel Price had been her friend. She had personally chosen him for this mission because she trusted him more than anyone else. When the recording ended, she spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "What are our options?" Admiral Harper stood. She had prepared for this moment. Part of her had known, from the second she saw Daniel's body, that this day would come. "The Varakan Empire controls 12 star systems," she said, activating a holographic display of the galaxy. "They have approximately 800 warships, most of which are old, but still powerful. Their technology is advanced, but our intelligence suggests they have become lazy. They have not fought a real war in over 200 years. They believe they are invincible. And what do we have?" President Ellis asked. 340 combat-ready vessels. "We are outnumbered, but not outmatched." Grace paused, then brought up a new set of files on the display. They were marked with the highest level of security classification. 5 years ago, after the first reports of Varakan aggression, the Coalition authorized a secret project. We called it Fenrir. The room fell silent as images appeared on the screen. Ships that no one had ever seen before. Weapons that existed only in classified laboratories. Technologies that humanity had developed in secret, hoping they would never need to be used. We built these weapons because we knew this day might come, Grace continued. We hoped it never would. We hoped that diplomacy would work, that we could find a way to live in peace with the Varakan. Ambassador Price believed in that hope. He died for it. Her voice hardened. But hope is not a strategy. And now that hope is gone. President Ellis stared at the display for a long moment. The other leaders watched her, waiting to see what she would decide. Some of them wanted war. Others were afraid. But all of them knew that the decision rested with her. Finally, she spoke. I sent Daniel Price to the Varakan with an offer of friendship. I sent him because I believed that every conflict could be resolved with words, that violence was never the answer. She paused, and when she looked up, her eyes were cold. I was wrong. Some enemies cannot be reasoned with. Some creatures only understand one language. She stood up from her chair. The Varakan murdered our ambassador. They tortured our people. They sent us a message written in blood and cruelty. They wanted to show us that we are weak, that we are nothing, that we should bow down and accept our place as their servants. Her voice rose, filling the chamber. We are going to send them a message in return. We are going to show them what humanity does when you hurt one of our own. We are going to teach them a lesson that they will never, ever forget. She turned to Admiral Harper. Prepare everything. Wake up Fenrir. Call back every ship, every soldier, every pilot who has ever worn our uniform. Send word to every colony and every station that humanity is going to war. Grace saluted. Yes, Madam President. As the leaders filed out of the chamber, President Ellis walked to the window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Varakan were laughing. They thought they had broken humanity's spirit. They had no idea what they had just awakened in the darkness of space. The wolves were starting to gather. And they were very, very hungry. For 6 months, Earth was silent. No ships crossed into Varakan space. No messages were sent. No threats were made. The galaxy watched and waited, wondering if humanity had simply accepted its defeat. High Lord Kethfer was pleased. He told his court that the humans had learned their lesson. He displayed Daniel Price's remains in his throne room as a trophy. A reminder to all who saw it that the Varakan Empire could not be challenged. Other alien races watched and took note. If the Varakan could do this to humans without consequence, what might they do to others? But the Varakan did not understand humans. They saw silence as surrender. They saw patience as weakness. They had no idea that across the stars, a storm was building that would shake their empire to its very core. On Earth, the factories that once built civilian ships were transformed overnight. Day and night, workers assembled weapons and armor and engines of war. In the asteroid belt, mining operations worked 3 shifts instead of 1, pulling metals and minerals from the rocks at a rate that had never been seen before. Shipyards that had been empty for decades came back to life, their docks filling with vessels of every size and shape. Admiral Grace Harper oversaw the construction of the fleet's new flagship. It was called the Achilles, and it was the largest warship humanity had ever built. 2 kilometers long, covered in armor and weapons, it was designed for one purpose: to lead humanity into battle and bring their enemies to their knees. Looking at it, Grace felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt hope. The man chosen to command the Achilles was Commander Nathan Drake. He was 45 years old, with a scarred face and eyes that had seen too much death. 10 years ago, his younger brother had been killed during a Varakan raid on a human colony. Nathan had requested assignment to the Border Patrol after that, spending years hunting Varakan pirates and waiting for the day when he would have a chance to face the Empire itself. That day had finally come. Nathan walked through the corridors of the Fithiers of the Achilles, watching the crew prepare for war. They were young, most of them, but their faces held a determination that made him proud. They knew what they were fighting for. They knew what the Varakan had done. "Commander Drake," a voice called out. Nathan turned to see Lara Simmons walking toward him. She looked different from the young woman who had accompanied Daniel Price to the Varakan homeworld. Her face was thinner, her eyes harder. There were scars on her arms that had not been there before. She had been rescued from a Varakan prison camp 3 months ago. A special operations team had tracked her location using intelligence gathered from captured enemy ships. When they found her, she had been held in a cell barely large enough to lie down in. She had been tortured for months, beaten and cut and burned, all because the Varakan wanted to break her spirit. They had failed. "Lavra," Nathan said, surprised. "I did not know you had been assigned to this ship." "I requested the assignment myself," she replied. "Admiral Harper approved it. I will be serving as your intelligence officer." Nathan studied her face. He could see the pain behind her eyes, the memories that would never fully fade. But he could also see something else. He could see steel. "Are you sure you are ready for this?" he asked quietly. Laura met his gaze without flinching. "I spent 4 months in a Varakan cell, Commander. They told me every day that humanity was weak, that we would never fight back, that I would die forgotten and alone. They were wrong about all of it. I'm not just ready for this. I have been waiting for this." Nathan nodded slowly. "Welcome aboard the Achilles, Lieutenant Simmons." While the military prepared for war, President Catherine Ellis prepared the people. She traveled to every major city on Earth, speaking to crowds that grew larger with each passing day. She visited the colonies on Mars and the stations in the asteroid belt. She broadcast messages to every human settlement in the solar system. Her words were simple, but they carried a power that moved millions. 6 months ago, the Varakan Empire committed an act of murder. They killed Ambassador Daniel Price, a man who went to them with nothing but hope for peace. They tortured our people. They sent us his body as a message, telling us to accept our place as their inferiors. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces before her. 6 months, we've been silent. Some have wondered if we have given up. Some have feared that we lack the courage to respond. But I tell you now that our silence was not weakness. Our silence was preparation. We have been building. We have been gathering. We have been getting ready. Her voice rose, filling the air. The Varakan think they know what humanity is. They think we are soft and weak and afraid. They think we will break under pressure, that we will bow down and accept whatever cruelty they choose to inflict upon us. They are about to learn how wrong they are. The crowd began to cheer, the sound building like thunder. Daniel Price went to them with open hands. He offered them friendship and trade and cooperation. They answered with a blade. Now we will answer in turn. Not with open hands, but with closed fists. Not with words, but with fire. We will show the Varakan Empire what it means to make an enemy of humanity. The cheering grew louder, shaking the ground itself. They wanted to teach us our place in the galaxy. We are going to teach them a lesson instead. A lesson about what happens when you hurt one of our own. A lesson about what human vengeance looks like. She raised her fist to the sky. For Daniel Price, for every human who has suffered under Varakan cruelty, for our future and the future of our children. We are coming for them. And God help anyone who stands in our way. Across the solar system, 300 million voices roared in response. The sound echoed through space, a promise and a warning. The storm was ready. Now it was time to unleash it. The Varakan border station at Calith Prime was considered one of the strongest defensive positions in the Empire. It was a massive structure, home to 5,000 soldiers and equipped with weapons that could destroy a small moon. The commander of the station, a veteran named Vethrol, had served the Empire for 60 years. He had never lost a battle. That record was about to end. The alarm started screaming at exactly midnight, local time. Vethrol rushed to the command center, his scales still rough from sleep. When he saw the sensor readings, he froze. 300 human warships had appeared out of nowhere. They hung in space like predators waiting to strike, their weapons already charging with deadly energy. At the center of the formation was a ship larger than anything Vethrol had ever seen. It was the Achilles, and it was pointed directly at his station. "This is impossible," Vethrol whispered. "Our intelligence said the humans would take years to prepare for war." "It seems our intelligence was wrong," his second-in-command replied, his voice shaking. Before Vethrol could respond, a transmission came through. A human face appeared on the main screen. It was Commander Nathan Drake, sitting calmly on the bridge of his flagship, as if he were about to have a casual conversation. "This is Commander Nathan Drake of the Earth Coalition warship Achilles," Nathan said. "I am speaking to the commander of Keleth Prime Station." Vethrol stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "This is Station Commander Vethrol. You have entered Varakan space without authorization. This is an act of war. The Empire started this war when you killed our ambassador," Nathan interrupted. His voice was calm, almost polite, but there was something beneath it that made Vethrol's blood run cold. "We are here to finish it. You have 10 minutes to evacuate your station. Any who wish to leave may do so. After 10 minutes, this station will no longer exist." Vethrol sputtered with rage. "You dare threaten the Varakan Empire? You are outnumbered, human. Our fleet will 9 minutes and 45 seconds, Nathan said. "I suggest you stop talking and start evacuating." The transmission ended. For a moment, no one in the command center moved. Then Vethrol began shouting orders. Evacuation alarms sounded throughout the station. Soldiers ran for escape pods, pushing and shoving in their desperation to get away. Some made it. Most did not. Exactly 10 minutes after the warning was given, the Achilles fired. The main cannon of the human flagship released a beam of pure energy that struck the station dead center. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the entire structure came apart, pieces flying in every direction as the power core exploded. 5,000 Varakan died in an instant. Nathan watched the destruction from his bridge. He felt no satisfaction, no joy. He had not wanted this war. None of them had. But the Varakan had made their choice when they murdered Daniel Price. Now they would face the consequences. "Set course for the next target," he ordered. "We have work to do." Over the following weeks, the human fleet carved a path through Varakan space like a hot knife through butter. They struck without warning, hit hard, and moved on before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Military bases were destroyed. Supply lines were cut. Defensive networks were torn apart piece by piece. Lavra, Simmons had provided detailed intelligence on every Varakan installation, every patrol route, every weakness in their defensive systems. During her months of captivity, she had watched and listened, gathering information that her captors never knew she possessed. Now that information was being used against them. "Their command structure is too rigid," Lavra explained during a strategy meeting aboard the Achilles. "They expect their enemies to fight the same way they do, in straight lines with obvious tactics. They do not know how to respond when we attack from unexpected directions." Admiral Harper nodded from the holographic display. She was commanding the fleet from Earth, coordinating movements across dozens of star systems. "What about civilian populations?" "We leave them alone," Nathan said firmly. "This war is with the Varakan military and their emperor, not with their people. We destroy military targets. We leave everyone else unharmed. But we make sure they see what we are doing," Laura added. "We want them to know that humanity is not afraid. We want them to see that their empire cannot protect them." The strategy worked better than anyone had expected. As the human fleet moved deeper into Varakan space, Stories began to spread among the civilian population. The humans were unstoppable. The humans showed mercy to those who did not fight. The humans were not the weak creatures the Empire had claimed. High Lord Cathver raged in his palace. His admirals brought him report after report of defeat and destruction. The humans had destroyed 15 major military installations. They had crippled the Empire's main shipyard. They had ambushed 3 separate battle fleets and left nothing but wreckage behind. "Send everything we have," the Emperor commanded. "Every ship, every soldier. I want the humans crushed." "High Lord," one of his admirals dared to say, "if we gather all our forces in one place, we leave the rest of the Empire undefended." Cathver turned his blood-red eyes on the admiral. "The rest of the Empire does not matter. Nothing matters except destroying these humans. They must learn what happens when they challenge the Varakan. Gather the fleet at the homeworld. We will make our stand there." The admiral bowed and hurried away. None of the other advisors dared to speak. They could see the madness growing in their emperor's eyes. The creature who had ruled them for so long was losing control. Far across space, Nathan Drake received word of the Varakan gathering. He stood on the bridge of the Achilles, looking at the tactical display that showed hundreds of enemy ships converging on a single point. "They are bringing everything they have to defend their homeworld," Lavra said, standing beside him. "Nearly 500 warships." Nathan nodded slowly. "Then that is where we will go. One battle to decide everything." He looked at her. "Are you ready for this?" Laura's eyes were hard as stone. "I have been ready since the day they took me. Since the day they killed Ambassador Price. Since the day they thought they could break humanity's spirit with cruelty and fear." She placed her hand on the viewport, looking out at the stars. "Now we show them just how wrong they were." The Varakan homeworld hung in space like a dark jewel, surrounded by the largest fleet the Empire had ever gathered. Nearly 500 warships formed a wall of steel and fire around the planet, their weapons pointed outward, waiting for the enemy to arrive. High Lord Cathver stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Crimson Throne. He wore ceremonial armor that had not seen battle in over a century, a symbol of the power that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Around him, his admirals and generals stood in nervous silence. "They will come," Cathver said, his voice calm despite the fire burning in his eyes. "The humans are too foolish to know when they are beaten. They will come, and we will destroy them, and the galaxy will remember for all time what happens to those who challenge the Varakan Empire." None of his officers responded. They had seen the reports from the front lines. They knew that the human fleet had cut through their forces like a scythe through wheat. But they also knew better than to argue with their emperor. The waiting ended at dawn. 300 human warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. At their center was the Achilles, its massive hull gleaming in the light of the distant sun. Behind it came carriers and destroyers and cruisers, every ship humanity could spare. Every weapon they could carry. Commander Nathan Drake stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the wall of enemy ships before him. The Varakan outnumbered them almost 2 to 1. By any reasonable calculation, the humans should have been afraid. They were not afraid. "All ships, this is Commander Drake," Nathan said into the fleet-wide communication system. "You know why we are here. You know what these creatures did to our people. They thought we would break. They thought we would bow down. They thought wrong." He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew. They were young, most of them, but their eyes held the fire of determination. "Today we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Today we avenge Ambassador Price and every human who has suffered under Varakan cruelty. Today we prove that you do not hurt one of our own without facing the consequences." His voice rose, filling the ship. "All ships, attack," The space between the two fleets erupted into chaos. Weapons fire crisscrossed the void like deadly rainbows. Ships exploded in balls of flame. Fighters dueled between the larger vessels, dancing and weaving as they hunted each other. The Varakan had numbers on their side, but the humans had something more. They had rage and grief, and a burning need for justice that could not be stopped. They fought with a ferocity that stunned their enemies, pushing forward when they should have retreated, attacking when they should have defended. The Achilles led the charge, its massive weapons tearing holes in the Varakan formation. Nathan stood at the center of the bridge, calling out orders in a voice that never wavered. Around him, his crew worked with desperate efficiency, knowing that every second counted. Laura Simmons stood at the intelligence station, feeding targeting data to the fleet. She watched the Varakan ships dying, saw the explosions that marked the end of enemy vessels, and felt something hard and cold settle in her heart. This was not about revenge, not really. This was about making sure that what happened to Daniel Price would never happen again. The battle lasted 12 hours. By the end, the Varakan Navy had been reduced to scattered remnants fleeing into deep space. Over 300 of their ships had been destroyed. The rest had surrendered or abandoned their positions. The space around the homeworld was filled with wreckage and bodies. The human fleet had lost 97 ships. Thousands of lives. But they had won. Human dropships descended on the capital city like a swarm of angry hornets. The Varakan population watched in silence as soldiers in heavy armor marched through their streets. There was no resistance. The fight had been knocked out of them. Admiral Grace Harper herself came down to the planet's surface. She walked through the gates of the Imperial Palace, the same gates that Daniel Price had walked through a year ago. Behind her came a squad of Marines, and at her side, Laura Simmons. They found High Lord Kethver on his throne. He had not fled. He had not tried to hide. He sat there in his ceremonial armor, clutching his scepter of office, staring at the humans with hatred burning in his blood-red eyes. "You have won nothing," the Emperor hissed. "Kill me if you wish. Another will take my place. The Varakan Empire is eternal." Grace shook her head slowly. "We are not going to kill you." She stepped aside, and Laura walked forward. The young woman who had been tortured in Varakan cells, who had been beaten and broken and left for dead, now stood before the Emperor, who'd ordered it all. "Do you remember me?" Laura asked quietly. "I was the aide to Ambassador Price. I was with him when your soldiers murdered him. I was the one your torturers could not break." Kethver said nothing, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear, perhaps, or surprise. Laura reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal object. It was a diplomatic service medal, tarnished and worn. It had belonged to Daniel Price. She placed it on the floor before the throne. "You wanted to teach humanity a lesson," she said. "You wanted us to know our place. You wanted us to understand that we were nothing compared to the mighty Varakan Empire." She leaned closer, her eyes locked on his. "Here is what you never understood about humans. We do not break. We bend, we bleed, we do not break. And when you hurt one of us, you do not just make one enemy. You make billions of enemies who will chase you to the ends of the universe." She straightened up. "We are not going to kill you. That would be too easy, too quick. Instead, you are going to live. You are going to watch as your empire falls apart. You are going to see your people choose new leaders, leaders who want peace instead of war. You are going to watch humans and Varakan learn to live together, to trade and cooperate, to become partners instead of enemies." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "That is what Daniel Price wanted. That is what he died for. And every day for the rest of your life, you will remember that you could have had it willingly. You could have had friendship and respect. Instead, you chose cruelty. This is what cruelty earned you. She turned and walked away. High Lord Kethver was taken into custody and eventually tried for his crimes. The Varakan Empire was dissolved, replaced by a coalition of free worlds that joined with Earth in a new alliance. The galaxy watched in wonder as the species that everyone had dismissed as young and weak proved that they were anything but. Years later, a statue was built on the Varakan homeworld. It showed Daniel Price with his hand extended, offering friendship to all who passed by. The inscription at the base was simple: "He came in peace. We answered with violence." May all who see this remember what might have been, and what humanity does when you harm the innocent. The galaxy had learned an important lesson that day. Humans were kind. Humans were generous. Humans wanted nothing more than to live in peace with their neighbors. But cross them? Hurt them? Kill one of their own? Then nothing in the universe would save you from their wrath.